And now it's time to call up our two debaters. The topic of our debate is going to be the following question. Should the trainer be the driver or a reactor when it comes to social changes? Riina Kütt comes to us from the training center Tulõtungal, and she is going to argue that the trainers should be the drivers of social changes. And we also have Kaido Vestberg from Mercuri International. And he will argue that no, the trainer should just react sensitively to social changes. Please have a seat. Before I give the floor to Riina for the first opening remarks, a few more notes about the debate. Debate is a polite intellectual sport, sort of like chess, and there should always be argumented reasonings and no personal conflicts. Hopefully there won't be any. So debates will feature opposing arguments, and they have to also be supported by examples. The objective of the debate is not to attack either of these debaters, but to rather open up a topic. Because in a natural state, when we're listening to something, we do pick a side and we don't consider the other side very thoroughly. So debates are meant to kind of open up both sides of the story. And what the debaters say might not be 100% representative of what they say, because the debate will be more valuable and more interesting for us if they lean towards the extremes. Of course, in real life, they might be closer to the center, but I have specifically asked them to take an extreme view on the issue. So they probably don't adhere to what they say 100%. But I think the mentality is expressed in what they say. In format, Riina will start. She has 5 minutes, and that's protected time. That means that during that time, you can't make comments. Of course, you can shush and knock at any point in time. Once Riina has finished, Kaido will have the floor, and another 5 minutes for his opening speech, and they will make their main arguments. Then it will be time for a second round. Again, another 5 minutes and 5 minutes. And in the second round, what they mostly will do is answer what they have heard in the first round, react, and show how they differentiate. Once we have gone through the second round, then we have then you all have the opportunity to speak. You will have a maximum of 2 minutes. And you can either support one side or the other, or express something that is important for you in the topic, or express neutrality. So that's all by way of instructions. I think everything is clear at this point, and it is now my pleasure to give the floor to Riina for 5 minutes. And now we knock. Great. Good afternoon. My name is Riina, and I'm an adult educator. Today I am here to represent the opinion that an adult educator has to be the driver of social changes. To confirm or to back up my opinion, I will give you 3 arguments. For starters, actually, driving social changes is in the genetic code of adult education, so to speak. I am aware that people become adult educators very differently. So one day you might be a top surgeon, and then the next day you're the trainer of surgeons. figuratively, of course. But that does not mean that the adult education and main principles will change. And those characteristics include driving social changes and preparing people for the changes, improving their personal lives to create social changes, and in a radical way, through adult education, adults change the social reality and they change the course of history. Second, it is my opinion that adult educators have to drive social changes because being the drivers gives them full responsibility. When we lead something, when we drive something, we are leaders, and leaders have to deal with positive results as well as negative consequences. I'll give you an example. We have talked a lot about digital competencies, the digital world, digital death. And the digital competencies, of course, give access to various resources, and that means people's equal opportunities are increased. But as we know, information is one of the basic needs of a human being, and having information all the time at your disposal also means that we become overly dependent of it. Dependence, in turn, however, puts us in a worse position. I'm not going to talk about the fact that the dependence of the digital world can influence our physical health because of a sedentary lifestyle or because of bad posture. Third, I find that an adult educator has to drive social changes because driving social changes first and foremost means determining yourself as a learner. Oftentimes, when educating adults, we tend to forget that the main content of the training is actually the learning. When we are the drivers, we also have to be the learners. We have to be at the forefront. We have to be ready to change ourselves. And being all that, we experience firsthand how difficult learning actually can be. Learning indeed takes time, it takes energy. Of course, it gives us back all that in spades, but without a big contribution, nothing is going to change. We are not going to change. Which means that if we have determined ourselves to be drivers of changes and we are learning and we are changing, through that we definitely can support the learning of our students better. Therefore, I find these are three very pertinent reasons for why adult educators have to be the drivers and they have to be in the wind and have to be the wind breakers rather than be caught in the tailwinds. Because if they do so, we can create more changes in society, we can have a broader impact on people as well as ourselves, and increase the learning capacity of people. That's all from me. Thank you. Thank you, Riina. You heard three arguments to support the opinion that adult educators, in those winds that surround us, the winds of change that we have mentioned, whether they are globalization or digital turns or any other changes. In any case, as educators, we have to be at the forefront of these changes. The drivers take that additional responsibility, learn more, and then bring the society along with us, because that's how we generate a positive change in society. But now it is going to be interesting to hear how Kaido positions himself in this argument. He says that we should rather observe in which direction the society moves, and then, as head trainer, as an educator, react. Now it's my pleasure to give the floor to Kaido. Thank you, Riina, for these very interesting arguments. I would like to go into them right now, but the format foresees that I now deliver the text that I have prepared. Unfortunate. And I will, since I have memorized it, I will give it to Riina so she can take notes. When I received the invitation to come and discuss this topic, my first reaction was, of course, we all have to be innovative. As Terje said, we have to go along with the times and be innovative. So the educator has to be like in the trenches and grab the flag and run. But then Riina said that you're not going to be in the red trenches. You're going to be the observing, analyzing side. So, and you have to also think about how to sensitively react. I still haven't understood what the sensitive part means, but in any case, I know what it means to react. I'm not the best of debaters. There are some facts that I don't believe in, and I thought, oh, what a bad position I'm in. Because it's hard to prove something you don't believe in. But then I thought I have to find something here that I can believe in and then prove it. And then I started to think about this issue. And I came to the conclusion that if we had stayed in the trenches before running out, perhaps we would not have had this half a century of living under a foreign power. So I came to the conclusion that if I were to answer this question, does an educator have to be a weather vane who reacts to every social change? Somebody says something and then we run. Or should we perhaps take some time and then act? I'm not going to give you arguments. I will give you 3 questions. And I believe that if we look for the answers, then we all understand that we can't be weather vanes. First question is, are all social changes welcome ones? Here, I'm reminded of an anecdote that people from the West like to tell when they talk about Estonian business habits. So there are 2 businessmen sitting there in a restaurant. It's a business lunch. One has a phone call and starts talking. The other one doesn't want to be a worse man, and then also calls his friend. And then the lunch is over and the men say to each other, let's call each other. So technological changes, how do we act? How do we act in one-to-one contacts and in digital contacts? In any case, we are in changes. Some like it, some don't. We're all different. And it's probably not smart to go along with every social change and at least drive it. Can social changes be driven? So there's a difference between change and change. Some changes happen, some changes are made. And there are some changes that just can't be directed. So if we approach it academically, perhaps changes can't be made. But let's look past scholastics and think in a wider perspective. The influence of Estonian language is decreasing. So considering that, people tend to want to speak foreign languages more. Should we be against that? But that's something that we can't direct either. And the third question is, what do we expect out of an educator? In the morning, we heard some about metaphors related to trainers. We don't expect information or skills from them because we can learn things ourselves, but we expect to be directed. In which direction do we have to go? So a trainer has to analyze different social changes and then decide how to react. Thank you. Thank you very much. So you heard 3 arguments from Riina and then 3 questions from Kaido. He did, of course, ask the questions, but also express some criticism. Now it's time for the second round. Both debaters will have the floor again. But now they will give an answer to a reaction to their opposing party and give their opinions. And I would like to also remind you that once this round is over, you have the opportunity to voice your own opinions. But now the floor is Riina's. Thank you to my colleague Kaido, who has put me in an interesting position where I can answer questions. It's true. As I was preparing this topic, I also thought about it in depth. I thought about how our social reality right now is such that the educator, to what extent do they drive these changes? And it seems to me that fate has played a role here in choosing the terms and choosing some words, starting with the fact that the name of our, or the title of our conference is the adult educator in the wind of change, not the winds of change. Which implies that it's we are the drivers and not the followers. And at one point, we have to discuss how we, as adult educators, can bring about changes. Of course, I presume that there are people among us who are aware of this mission. And they do strive towards social change with each training course that they do, through specific people, through specific situations. But perhaps there could also be a more wide approach to the society as a whole, so that we would not be weather vanes, so that we would not be following changes, but bringing about changes. When it comes to the different types of changes, I think I just dealt with that topic. And actually, what Kaido said was quite correct. We have to have the right words to go with the right thoughts and the right sentences. And if we don't use terminology right, then it doesn't just work. So I would like to repeat my first thought that because of it is written in their genetic code, the adult educator, as one of their main characteristics, should be ready to change things, to manage changes, lead changes. To answer the question, what do we expect from an educator? We expect for them to be somebody who shows us the direction, And also that means bringing about social changes in terms especially of being aware of taking the responsibility for the results as well as the consequences, and also for learning, for becoming aware. And through that also being more professional. Because everything that we are saying right now takes us in the same direction that we already talked about today. If the adult educator is aware of their own role, if they systematically develop their own field and themselves, then that increases their professional and personal autonomy within their profession. And through all that, it is possible to be the type of adult educator who shows the way. Who shows the way and who is the indicator of the direction. Also, Kaido expressed the idea of whether we need to run out of the trenches right away, whether it would be perhaps better to sit and think about things a bit. I believe that professional adult educators can tell in which situation they need to act fast or in which situation they should just sit out the bigger attack and then get out of the trenches once the mines aren't exploding anymore.
Mulle väga meeldis see, kuidas Riina oma sellisel armsal leebel moel ütles midagi.
I really liked it. The way Riina put it, that she kind of gave a little bit of she posed a challenge to Kaido, I think. The educators can be drivers of progress if there is an agreement among educators which direction the development should be driven in. Kaido also has time for a little bit of rebuttal. It seemed throughout that Riina might have been supporting a little bit of the points that Kaido made previously. It happens quite often during debates that the opponents kind of tend to agree. But in addition, we still will hear Kaido's rebuttal to the opening free statement by Riina. And before we give word over to you, the audience, we will do a quick overview of what Kaido has to say. When looking at the free arguments by Riina, then I can agree. Of course, educators are those that are want to show themselves that they take full responsibility, of course, otherwise it wouldn't make sense to talk about it, because, of course, we are ethical also. And third, the education is the best, the training or educating is the best way of learning something yourself. I've always said that if you want to learn something, try and teach it to someone else. When talking about the bigger perspective and the mission, then this is a more important topic or a bigger topic. It's been discussed today within the values. For example, Larissa Jõgi also said that the metaphor was that is showing the direction. Then the question is what the direction actually is. I'm pretty sure that in Syria, the ISIS trainers are really good at trainers. The question, however, is whether it is worth teaching what they do. And if we want to go this route, throughout training, throughout the teaching, you can change society, otherwise it's not possible. But how do we find the right direction? That's a separate question. For example, the moderator also brought an example from a practitioner to practitioner. It's something that's very much common nowadays during different training programs. We think that practitioners are the best trainers for practitioners. I hear this quite often in my work, and this is also used very often. But if you talk to the people that what is the practice actually, then of course it's a little hard to understand, or harder to understand. There's a Chinese proverb that says that you don't step in the same river twice. I think the same situation that we're seeing at the moment won't exist in the future anymore. What is the task of theoretics? They take a lot of practical examples from different practitioners, want to try and find the common ground and make some the conclusions based on that. Quite often, what we need to do is that the trainees or those we educate, we need to make them think of things that they maybe haven't thought of before. And this is the task and goal of educators, as I see it. The mission, what we want to achieve is a societal contract or agreement. And this is, again, something, for example, let's talk about politics, whether you look at it from the conservative point of view or as the nationalist or left or right wing, and it's, again, a question of approach. Mighty, who by now has left, my colleague, has spoken quite a bit of whether a trainer can actually be a politician. Depends. For example, if it's just business, then I think believing in one thing too much will blind you. This political background can actually influence a lot. So I think the trainer needs to be able to distance themselves from their own personal background. And of course, it is a very complicated task. But social change is all around us. It's constantly happening. We need to think really thoroughly before we start supporting one change or another. Thank you. Well, during the classical era, there were the sophists and the philosophers. So we won't try to go that route, and we don't try to pick a winner. Maybe you have come to new conclusions or questions that you didn't have before. So hopefully, in that sense, the debate has fulfilled its purpose. We have microphones here. This is not centered on this table-based approach as we had before. It's very much individual. If you want to talk about some certain idea that you came up with during the debate, everyone who's interested can come and get the microphone. And at least people are now looking at me. Before it wasn't the case. You don't need to come in front of everyone. Am I in a room that's full of educators or not? Are you not used to standing in front of people and talking? It seems as if my trick finally worked. I think it's mostly about me wanting to help the moderator. 3 theses. The first one, absolutely every little movement that we do, every training that we conduct, every speech that we hold carries some values. There's no education without values. The question is, however, do we even realize what values we carry? Have we put them into certain words, or even without phrasing them, do we know what they are? Is it conscious or not conscious? this has an impact on our social value and social impact as a whole. Second thesis. Training that's not socially sensitive is not within a context. Without context, it doesn't speak to anyone. Third thesis. Every training aspires to some sort of change. If there's no change that happens, then the training has been a wash, and nothing happens. And coming back to my first point, are the changes that I try to induce are they conscious decisions or not?
Innustas kedagi järgmist.
Thank you very much. Did this inspire anybody to also pick up the microphone and express their ideas that they heard from these debates, discussions? Anybody else want to help me out? Oh, there we go. Hello? As I was listening to these speeches, I was thinking about whether you can drive social changes alone. So should it be the educator, the trainer? So when we heard from the ministry representative that the education is very fragmented, we have around 1,000 organizations, then perhaps we need to come together to drive these changes. Thank you. I think that's a very good idea. I think we should merge. And I do represent also an umbrella company or organization. But of course, there are different levels of education, and then merging those parts, like formal, non-formal, it's a bit more difficult. Any other people who have been inspired by these expressions of opinion? Great. Based on these speeches, I would actually support the reacting sensitively, not being the driver. Because if there are changes that are against our values as individuals, as a people, then our task actually is to uphold and maintain knowledge and traditions. So we don't always have to change things, we have to maintain something as well and protect things as well. Any other takers? Very well. I believe our debaters and our participants are all, give them a big applause, please.